yeah.
Of course. Josh, pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you, man. Well, here again, another episode of Around Town. I'm here with Matt Himm today. First time I met you today, and I don't know how it's possible. We graduated the same year, but you're at Fairfield High School, I'm at Hamilton, but we got tons of friends on Facebook, so I mean, it's about time we met, I guess.
Yeah, we know a lot of the same people.
I bet we do. We'll talk about maybe that another day. But you know, you're the president of the board of the Butler County Mental Health and Addiction Services. It's a mouthful, is that right?
Addiction Recovery Services.
Addiction Recovery Services. And you were telling me before we started, how many people in Butler County do you guys touch a year?
2022, our numbers just came out as around 83,000.
And that's just an insane number to me. 83,000. How many people in the county?
390,000.
It's like 20%.
Yeah, 1 out of 5.
1 out of 5 people in the county come through needing services here, one way or the other.
Right, and you got to remember too that we're payer of last resort. So, you know, people have private insurance, they can pay out of pocket. You know, so there's a lot more people receiving services inside the county. Those are just the services that we provided.
So it's even, the issues that we're dealing with are even, you know, bigger than the 83,000 is already an insane number. That's the people who don't have another option, so it's even more people.
Correct.
Need help with mental health or addiction, and kind of talk about, you know, how those overlap, because I know there's a lot of overlap between addiction and mental health.
Yeah, there's a significant amount of what's called dual diagnosis. So somebody has a mental health disorder attached with some type of substance use disorder. A lot of times, substance use disorder is almost a symptom of mental health incapacities or mental health disorders, whether it be temporary, permanent. So people need to seek out services, and a lot of times if they don't know where to go, this is where they come. And we're issued with spending taxpayer dollars. We have 19 contract providers that we deal with here in Butler County. A lot of people have heard of most of them. It's Sojourner, Butler Behavioral Health, Community Behavioral Health, Genesis. Most people have heard a lot of those names inside the county, but we do deal with some of the smaller providers too. But one of the biggest things that we do is actually provide services in all the schools. That's one of the biggest things. That's how we touch a lot more people. We do a lot with prevention services. We have an amazing provider here out of Butler County that goes into all the school districts and works with all the kids in prevention. So that's how we touch thousands and thousands of people.
Okay. And talk a little bit about the road that brought you here to be on this board. It was a long road. It wasn't always all highs. There was some lows in there. I know. So kind of give us your background, how you ended up in this position.
Sure. I'm a recovering addict myself. I'll have 10 years clean and sober in October of this year.
Well, congrats.
My wife also, she'll have 8 years, April 2nd of this year. I am a convicted felon. I ended up going to prison at 30 years old for 2 felony charges of theft that I picked up. And when I was in prison, I kind of made a decision while I was in there to kind of learn what was wrong with me. A lot of people don't realize that in Ohio we have recovery available to us and rehabilitation. So I decided to dive into it and get some rehab and take as many services as I could while I was in there and learn. When I got out, my wife was still really sick, and we got her into inpatient treatment. And then as we started to rebuild our lives, and I started getting really active in the community, I was doing a lot of public speaking engagements, and somehow somebody came across me and they said, I think somebody could use your help, and it ended up being here at the board. So I ended up applying to be a board member. I believe it was in January of 17. So I'm in my 17 or 16. So I'm in my 6th or 7th year here with the board. And as I got more and more involved, I realized that this is probably the place for me to be. So.
I know you told me before you were a little bit hesitant. When someone asked you to come check out the board, you're a little bit hesitant if you should. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think the biggest hesitation was that I was a convicted felon. Both of my charges are for theft. So that brings some apprehension on my behalf to think what the general public may think of me having that type of legal background, knowing that I'm dealing with the appropriation of taxpayer dollars. But I realized really fast that there's obviously checks and balances that are in place. There's 18 board members as a whole, and that there was no challenges when it came to that. Actually, the more I got involved with the board, the more I realized that they were using me as an asset, which is what I was hoping to have happen. As I got more and more involved in the community, doing outreach, advocacy, I realized that people were actually going to say and do things that I asked and take me seriously. From more of a professional standpoint, a lot of the folks that make the decisions inside the county, whether it be the actual directors and CEOs of all these providers, county officials, they really started to listen because I was coming from a place of honesty and openness and sharing my experiences and the things that I've been through, being almost a lifelong Butler County resident, knowing that I could be the face of truth and honesty. They could ask me questions that they didn't generally get to ask somebody that had been through the things that I have. And if they did ask other folks, they tended to not get a truthful or honest answer. Yeah. That way we could try to create programs and really help people out that needed help.
It's just a great example of like a second chance and making the most of it. You know, you're more than just the mistakes you made. A lot of times people, even yourself, you doubted that sometimes, you know, and I think people, I don't know if it's called taking a chance or just believing in you, I guess, would be, helps you, you know, kind of have a platform to help so many other people.
And I think that was one of the things that drove me the most to really wanting to do it, was because I felt like I had something to prove to the community. I was not a good person for a few years of my life. I hurt people. I left a wake of devastated people, you know, not my family, but the victims of my crimes. You know, I still think about that stuff daily. I hurt people. And I felt like for me to try to make things right in the community, from being a public menace, you know, dealing drugs on the street, running drugs, doing drugs, putting people's lives in danger, that I almost felt that it was my duty to try to right those things and be as involved as I can to make more of a positive influence and kind of equalize or neutralize the negativity that I had done.
I mean, it's an awesome thing, because I mean, I know you serve jail time, and a lot of people, when they do a crime, they serve their jail time, and that's their atonement. You know, that's society's atonement. But you felt like that wasn't quite enough, I guess.
It took me a month of doing my board work to realize that my community service was going to be my form of recovery. This is all these years I've been doing all my community service. I realized that this is the most important thing for me to do for accountability. I now have 390,000 residents of the county that are going to hold me accountable for my recovery, because if I'm not sober, I'm not clean, and I'm not active in the things that I'm doing, the chances of a relapse or going back to doing the things I was doing is actually rather high.
Yeah.
So I use that as my accountability.
So it's giving back to your community, but it's for yourself too. And
right.
I mean, giving, people always say, you know, giving is better than receiving, and
right.
I think, you know, you get a lot out of it when you give yourself and your time, because it's a lot of time commitment. I sit on boards, and you know, how much time are you putting in this? And it's a volunteer position. I know you have a job you pay the bills with. It's not here.
Right.
How much time are you spending in a month?
It can be quite significant. Besides the mandatory meetings that we have monthly, I do anywhere from 3 to 6 other meetings per month. Try to schedule based around my professional job and my work. Anytime providers or anybody in the public domain needs any type of advocacy, whether it be any pushback from municipalities, townships, county officials, things like that, I go in an educational advocacy role. And it could take up, you know, an extra 40 hours of my month, almost, you know, another part-time job, but it is well worth my time commitment to do it.
You know, what was the moment, if there was a moment you can remember, that made you decide I'm going to make a change and turn it around, and then you know, your wife did the same thing after you. What do you think? Like, was there a rock bottom, or is there something that just flipped a switch in you that made you want to do differently?
Yep, I tell this story all the time. I do 30 speeches a year at all the major universities, Miami, UC, Cincinnati State. My wife and I go in and talk to all the nursing students when they're in their psych curriculum, and I tell this part of my story every single time. The moment I was in the courtroom, Judge Michael Sage in 2013, for sentencing on my felony, and he sentenced me to 15 months. Bailiff came behind me and put the cuffs on me in the courtroom, to take me to the jury box, to take me to jail so I could ride the prison. My 3-year-old son was in the courtroom with me. I took him with me to my sentencing, just me and him. And when the cuffs went on my hands, my son started screaming for me. He's like, Daddy, I want my daddy. And thank God my mom showed up, to support me and had care of my son at that time. But that was it. That was my tap out. This is over. I'm done. What have I done? What do I do? All the questions start hitting you, and I was like, I'm never doing this ever again. I never touched anything ever again.
Sometimes it takes something awful to flip the switch, and some people never do, unfortunately. I mean, as well as I do, this part of Ohio and this part of the country, we've been hit really hard by, the same kind of stuff you're struggling with.
Right.
What would you tell somebody out there who hasn't turned it around yet, or is still kind of in the depths of, addiction? Is it just they got to find someone to support them, or what is it?
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's very internal. One day it'll happen, and it can happen to anybody. One of the biggest things is not ever losing hope. We lose hope quite quickly when we're in the battles of some type of addiction.
Yeah.
It's very private. It's very internal. The internal dialogue and the mental mind frame that goes on is extremely powerful. And just know in those moments of weakness and the things that you're going through that change is possible. To give you the severity of what mine and my wife's addiction had gotten to, I mean, for 2 years, we could each do 20, 30, Percocets a day each. Eventually turned to intravenous, drug use with heroin, and we were kind of doing anything that was around, but opioids were our drug of choice. But when you're that in depth and you're that involved with that level of drug abuse, you feel helpless, and you're not. And that's one thing that is the most important about what we do here and in the public domain, is to tell people that it's not helpless. And
there's always a little bit of hope.
There's always help. There's always hope. There's always help that's available.
I want to touch on your background a little bit more, because I think sometimes people hear you were talking earlier, you got a felony and you were selling drugs at one point in your life, but that wasn't the whole story of your life even before. You didn't grow up younger doing that. You were telling me you were a hockey player and kind of had a pretty good childhood, right?
I did.
So I think that's important for people here, because I think a lot of people kind of grow up middle class, think, that ain't going to happen to me. That's somebody else in a bad neighborhood that's going to happen to. It can happen to anyone. And can you kind of give a little more background into that?
Sure. I grew up 2 blocks from here, man.
Yeah.
I grew up just down the street here in Fairfield. I grew up playing ice hockey, played until I was 22. When I stopped playing, I realized, oh man, I probably should go to college. Because now I don't have any career path. Hockey was just done. I just was not playing anymore. So Julie and I just started dating, and we realized that I should probably go to school, and we packed everything up and moved to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And I went to college down there and ended up graduating in 2008 with a degree in business, golf complex operations management. So I was a golf pro down there for years. Same golf course the entire time I was down there. And then it was really when we moved back here, when drug abuse really started to get bad. But yeah, I don't come from a history or background. It was never in my home. My parents, I can count on one hand the many times I saw my dad even drink a beer. My mom has no history of, they never smoked, they never drank. But I do come from a long genealogy of grandparents and extended family, aunts, uncles, a lot of my cousins that have severe substance use disorders and or mental health disorders. I did not know anything about that growing up. I didn't know about that until post-incarceration, and I really started diving into, man, what's going on? I learned about both my grandfather's deaths at a really young age, and both my grandfathers were heavy smokers. My dad's dad was a heavy drinker. And then I have a long history of it, and I was susceptible to it, and flipped the switch as soon as I started doing street drugs.
But you've turned it around. I mean, it seems like completely, and I know you're doing well now. Not only with your public service, but you gotta. Before I jump into your company, I don't even know if I want the answer to this, but I'm gonna ask. Butler County, how are we doing with the addiction, the epidemic, the drug epidemic? Is it getting better, worse, same?
So it's roughly the same. Our numbers fluctuate year to year. Unfortunately, there's a couple numbers that we track that are the most devastating. Obviously, overdose deaths are being the leading one that we kind of go off of. I believe we retraced a year ago, but our, as in 2021, but last year our numbers were back up. And then another number that we base a lot of things on is suicide.
Okay.
Not just actual suicide, but suicide attempts. And those numbers are also up. We're trying to delve into the numbers. Our population is growing, so we're trying to see if those numbers are going up according to population growth, because the more people you have living here, obviously you would tend to see the same type of percentage increase in those unfortunate events happening. Since I've been on the board, there have been an implementation of many new programs. So it's hard to all encompass and wrap around the needs of that many people. We do have several of our, cities. I'm definitely not going to point any of them out on
for sure. That'd be easy. Get us both in trouble.
Right, but most people know some of the problem areas in our county. And we do our best to provide as many services to them as we can.
There's a lot of services out there, and not just one organization. I mean, you said there's 19 providers you guys work with?
Correct, 19 contract providers, yes.
If people want help, it's out there, but sometimes people don't know about it, or sometimes they might not think they need it now.
Right.
But there's options.
So the biggest thing is there will be, one of the biggest plugs I could possibly put out there is that Butler County does have a crisis hotline. It's 24/7. It operates 365 days a year.
Maybe we'll throw the phone number here in the video.
The phone number is very easy. You see it on all the billboards out on the streets, and I think we have 7 or 8 billboards across the county. The number is 8444-CRISIS. Okay. So the number 4 and then the word crisis. That's correct.
All right.
That's 24/7. We have some of we call them their care coordinators. Beckett Springs Hospital is actually the contract provider that we contract with. So their staff, their nurses, they are on the streets at all times. So if you call that number, you're going to contact a nurse, and they're going to send a care coordinator out to you immediately. If you don't need immediate attention, then they're going to give you all the phone numbers and all the contacts, tell you where you need to go if you're ready for treatment, if you're ready for mental health treatment, substance use treatment. They know all the open beds.
Just a good resource in general.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If somebody is in direct crisis, if they're a harm to themselves or harm to others, there are crisis care teams on standby 24/7. So if you come across that, if you're a family member, a friend, or anything, or even if you're the person that's in crisis, you can call the crisis number, and they will have a team of people to you immediately. And there's the biggest thing that we have to stress is there's usually no threat of any type of arrest.
Okay, well, that's a big deal.
Right.
I'm an attorney. I don't do criminal defense anymore, but I used to. And a lot of times people, they don't want to call themselves if they need help, or a loved one because they don't want them to get in jail. They know they're on probation or something. If they call this line, they're going to try not to get the police.
They're going to have healthcare professionals.
Okay.
They're not going to have police.
And that's probably what they need.
Sometimes there might be a police that's dispatched, and they'll be on standby just in
safety
case.
Or something.
That's exactly right.
Gotcha.
Yep.
That's a really good point. If people, are there volunteer opportunities here? If people want to help with the board, you sit on here at the Mental Health and Addiction Recovery Service, or is it donations? How can people help if they want to?
The thing is with donations, it's usually not necessary because it is tax driven.
Okay, we already donated.
Right, it's all taxpayer dollars, so it's not necessarily like a fundraising, send me your money type thing. A lot of times time is always of utter value to us. We do a lot of public events, because you need to be out in the public and setting up. We do a lot with the Miracle League field, or with Joe Nuxall, the Hamilton Joes.
Yeah, the Hamilton Joes.
The Hamilton Joes.
Who would they reach out to if they wanted to volunteer?
Sure,
if they were in college, they want to get some hours in, stuff like that?
Sure. So here at the board office, Dr. Scott Rasmus is the executive director.
Okay.
Jennifer Coates is the administrative assistant. And then Joanna Lowry is the executive director of addiction services, and Scott Foreman is the executive director of mental health services. So it's kind of a a pyramid type of structure here at our board, where you have the executive director, and then you have the mental health side, and you have the addiction side. So a lot of people may be passionate about one or the other. So if you want to get in contact with mental health services, it's more of a Scott Foreman. If you want to get in contact with more of addiction services, that's going to be Joanna Lowry. And kind of Jennifer Coates would be the administrative assistant that works with Scott, that kind of runs everything else.
All right.
But that's the direct board number here. I apologize, it's very rare that I call the board office.
Yeah,
but
yeah, we'll
you
find
can
the
always
phone number.
you can always Google
we'll put the
Butler.
link to the website in here.
Exactly.
All right, so I like bringing things full circle if I can. I can't always do it. So I know you said before your addiction kind of took hold of your life, you got a business degree, and then you kind of went in the depths, and then you came out of it, and you're using your business degree now. You run a business. I'll give you a little shout out for that. What do you guys do?
Sure. I own a construction company. I've had it for 6 years. When I got out of prison, I realized that my golf career and my industry career, corporate type of career, was probably over due to my charges. And at that time, I didn't have the finances or the means to try to even get them expunged. I didn't even qualify that early on. I qualify for expungement now. But I realized I should probably learn something that would be felon friendly. So I started to learn carpentry and building. I started my own company with a business partner. We started doing some contracting work for another company here out of Butler County, and one thing led to another, and he actually offered for us to buy him out. So we bought him out in October of 2017. So I own a company called Barnes Unlimited. We specialize in pole buildings, residential garages, agricultural garages. We've been around for over 30 years here in Butler County, and we stay busy. We've had year-over-year growth. We had a record year last year.
Congrats.
So everything is all in well.
Geographic scope, how far out will you go to build a big barn or something?
Sure, we specialize in Butler County rural.
Okay.
That's where we typically stay: Oxford, Okeana, Hanover Township, Morgan Township. Okay. We do go into southern Preble County, Camden, that area. And then also, like right now, we're building for a huge church in Evendale, Landmark Baptist Church, right behind St. Rita's. So we'll go outside a little bit, but 95% of our work is Butler County rural.
Enough here to keep you busy.
Exactly.
All right. Well, Matt, I really appreciate you sitting down and talking to me. Congrats on turning everything around, and thanks for all you're doing here, helping other people. Showing an example that what can be done after an addiction, and just shining a light on the possibilities that are out there for somebody who's maybe went down the wrong road for a little while and wants to get back on the right one.
Well, I also appreciate you putting a spotlight on a lot of awesome people
around
around our place here.
Better sitting at the office.
Exactly.
All right, thanks,
Thank
Matt.
you so much. Appreciate it.
That was great.
It's pretty good one, man. Yeah, it's different. I love doing these because they're so different. You get to meet people.
Right.
You get to hear all different kinds of stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good stuff.